I understand the next financial review.
Okay. Honourable members, I understand that the next financial review that members wish to debate is the financial review of the Primary Production Committee on the non-departmental appropriations.
The Ministry
for Industries. I call the Honourable Damien O'Connor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. A little over 2 weeks ago, we had a very revealing document tabled in this House, Mr. Speaker, that says more about the government's management of primary industries than anything else. It came from the Auditor-General, probably the organisation with the most credibility across this nation, Mr. Speaker, and that document was very revealing. It, of course, stated the obvious, that our country is more dependent on biosecurity than any other developed country, Mr. Speaker. And it stated in there, it is my view, quote, that MPI is underprepared for potential incursions from some high-risk organisations. Mr. Speaker, the Minister in the chair there, his response was that since the year 2000, funding for biosecurity has doubled. And you know what? That's the truth. What he failed to say is that all of that funding, Mr. Chairman, occurred under a Labor government, and the first thing that the National government did in coming in was slash $2 million from frontline biosecurity services, Mr. Chairman. Can I quote the part 3 of the document here? It says, Mr. Chairman, the Ministry has lacked a strategic approach to capability. This includes workforce planning and, with some exceptions, its approach to information and information technology. Both of these areas represent serious risks for the Ministry. Well, they're greater risks for the country, Mr. Chairman, particularly when you go over the page where you read again, the lack of realistic business planning also affected the preparation of new response plans. Insufficient resources have meant that many of the plans have not been completed or tested to ensure they are fit for purpose. Mr. Speaker, each and every day we are under huge threat from biosecurity incursions that could cripple this economy. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Minister's Department fought the pork industry to allow pork imports from countries that have PRRS, porcine reproductive and respiratory syndrome, Mr. Speaker, a disease that costs the US industry $600 million every year. The Ministry fought the pork industry to lower the import health standards to allow pork that might satisfy a few supermarkets and a few pork industry traders. Mr. Speaker, it is simply not good enough that the national government slashes funding for biosecurity, that allows and oversees a ministry that is ill-prepared for these. It states in the report we are ill-prepared for an outbreak of foot and mouth disease, let alone the increased risk from things like PRRS. Mr. Speaker, it is a shocking indictment on a national government that claims to be the representative party of the primary producers, Mr. Speaker, that it has stood by and ignored the realities of this report that we've known for some time, Mr. Speaker, slashing funding for biosecurity, Mr. Speaker, and for the Minister to get up and say that funding has doubled since 2000, but fail to say almost every one of those dollars occurred under a Labor-led government, Mr. Speaker, not national, is an insult to the good people who run biosecurity services up and down this country. They know full well the risks that we incur from visitors, from imports, from everyday trade, let alone the determination by the Ministry of Primary Industries to allow in pork under reduced import health standards, to allow Australian honey, and with the diseases that might come from that, Mr. Speaker. We have facing us every day an example of the failure of a ministry that gave us reassurance time and time again that it was world-class through PSA. We have a kiwi fruit industry that has been devastated by PSA, by a government department that failed and was incapable of assessing the risks. Mr. Speaker, the Auditor-General has said quite clearly that unless something is done to increase the resources, stated here, there are insufficient resources to carry out the planning necessary, Mr. Speaker. The government must put more funding into biosecurity. It must raise the bar because of the increased levels of visitation by people from countries like China, Mr Speaker, or you name it. We have every day coming into this country palm kernel expellaire, PKE, needed for cows. Understandable, Mr Speaker. We have droughts, we have shortages of feed. But the ministry is in no way prepared to assess and prepare for the risks that might come through foot and mouth disease, Mr Chairman. The government is simply not prepared.
I call the Honourable Minister Nathan Guy.
Mr Chair, well, it's an opportunity for me to respond to the member.